So here's a snow base that I just recently did on a Terminator sized base. As you can see, it's kind of done in the style like the snow either just fell or is kind of melting now. So it's kind of got a lot more exposed kind of ground, and you can kind of see through it and everything. I really like this look more than the 3 feet of snow that the models are going through. It's just, I don't know, I like the more grimy, kind of dirty look to things, I guess. So I'll be going over this today. So a quick review of the materials that you'll need. I'll use some cork for the rocks and stone. Then you have your glues that you're going to want to use. Then for paints, I use the Etchin Gray, I believe it is. I looked on the paint chart. I think this is still what it's called. I don't think it's changed names. Codex Gray, which has changed names to Dawnstone. Then I also used the texture paint, the Astral Granite. Then I used a shade of Agrax Earthshade. And then I'll also be using the texture paint Morn Mountain Snow. I also have a set of these they're called tufts, Tundra Tuff from the I guess from Battlefields, and they work for the grass effect. And then I also have a thing of the Citadel Snow. There's many different types of brands of snow, stuff like this. I know some people said that baking powder, baking soda works well for the snow effect. I mean, there's a Games Workshop about 5 minutes for me, so I just ran in there real quick and grabbed a box of that. Alright, for the project, to make it a little bit easier to see, I'm actually going to be doing it on a dreadnought base, so it'll be a little bit bigger, but it'll still be the same techniques and everything. It'll just be a little bit easier to show on camera and everything. Alright, well, let's get going. Alright, so the first step I like to do is try to set up my my pattern or where I'm going to put the rocks for the cork. So I just tore off a few pieces here. You can find these cork board pretty much at any kind of hobby, hardware store, stuff like that. It's very cheap, and I've got a huge, large roll of it now. So I just kind of start tearing it and kind of just placing it where I think it might go. You can kind of layer them since they are kind of thinner. If you want a little bit more rock than not. Sometimes I'll do two, and you gotta be kind of careful depending upon what your tools are. I might try to kind of shave some of it down a little bit to kind of give it more of a sloped look, since it is kind of an abrupt incline right there. Alright, so I'll just go through and I'll kind of shape all this up and put it on here, and we'll be right back. Alright, so I've got the cork placed as to where I like it. I'm going to start gluing it here in a second. But I just want to kind of show, so I always like to kind of stick whatever model is going to end up on this base on there, so I can kind of get a good idea of what it looks like, and then I like the placement of it. And I can make little adjustments here and there and make sure I also have room for the model to actually be able to stand in there. So here I've got the legs to my dreadnought that's going to be using this base, which will be Bjorn. So just kind of get a good approximation, and from there I'm going to start putting the glue on. For the glue, I use super glue, and I also use some of the plastic glue. The only reason why I use the plastic glue is to kind of thicken it up a little bit, the super glue, and to help the cork stick better just in general to the base, because I guess because of the way the properties of the cork are in general, it tends to soak up the super glue. So you either have to use a lot of super glue and oftentimes get it all over your fingers, and then your next thing you know, your fingers are stuck to the base. Or I found this works pretty well, just to kind of I'll put some super glue down, and then I'll put like a little dab of the plastic glue on there, and it just kind of helps thicken it up, so that way the cork doesn't just slide off before it's dry, and it doesn't soak it all up right away either. Alright, after the glue dried, I went ahead and put a coat of Chaos Black spray paint on there for a base coat, and just make sure I got everything nice and black. And the next step is to start painting the cork to make it look a little more like rocks. So first I'm going to start with this etching gray, which I'm not sure, it might be Mechanicus standard gray now, but any really dark shade of gray will work. So a little bit of a brush, I'm actually going to kind of do like a dry brush type of thing, and then just kind of, well actually, it is because the cork is so dry and it soaks it up. I'm just start roughly going over it. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can get a couple streaks in there and it'll start to fill in nicely. The nice thing about the cork is it has all these cracks and crevices that kind of keep that nice 3D effect to it. So, yeah, so I'll go through this and go and do all the rock, and we'll be on to the next step. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the first kind of layer down. It may be kind of hard to see. There's a little bit of a glare there, but as I said, as you can see, there's nice little nooks and crannies. Gives it good depth and everything. So now I'm going to use this lighter gray. This is Codex gray, which, like I said before, is now Dawnstone gray. So we're just going to kind of do the same technique. I'm actually going to go a little bit lighter on this one and just kind of slightly pick out the edges and just ever so slightly go over the rock some. And as you go over some of those other edges, it's really going to pick up the paint a lot better than the flat surfaces. That's alright. And as you can see, you can kind of already tell there's a good contrast here. Try to move a little bit closer. You might not be able to tell too well, but you can see it's starting to brighten it up a little bit and kind of bring out the details of the cork to make it look more stone-like. So I'm going to do that on the rest of it. I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got the cork done. Now the next step is going to be to use this texture paint, Astro Granite. So again, if you've never used it before, it's got a really thick consistency. I mean, you can see it's really thick and gravelly, which is pretty good because it's going to add that texture to the model. So I use an old crappy brush, and I basically just kind of start to glob it onto the base here, and then I'll move it around with the brush here in a minute. So I'm going to cover all the base that is not covered by the cork. I am going to leave a little area somewhat open. Yeah, I'm going to leave it right there. That's just so that way when I do go to glue the model, I want to be able to have something that it can actually glue to and it'll stick. You can pin the model, which will work, but it's always nice to have, at least I like to have good plastic-to-plastic contact to let that plastic glue really take hold and secure the model well. Alright, so I'm going to do this up, and then we gotta let this dry, and then once it's dry, then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now the Astro Granite has dried. You can see the texture in there is quite kind of bumpy, stony, looks like rock and everything. There are a few spots in here, kind of over here, that look kind of smooth. There's not a whole lot of texture to them. That's fine, because we're going to add some more stuff to it, so you really don't need to worry about getting like a lot of texture out of this paint. This is just kind of add a little more gravelly effect to it for it in general. So now the next step that I do is I'm going to add some of the Agrax Earthshade. And the reason why this and not like the Newland oil is because this is a brown shade, so it kind of adds more of a muddy appearance or look to it. So, because the ground, outside, the side of a mountain or wherever this might be, isn't necessarily just stone. There's going to be some dirt and mud in there too. So I'm actually going to use a different brush. But yeah, you can, be quite liberal with how you put this on. Just kind of get it all in the nooks and crannies and everything. And yeah, and so once I'm finished with this step, I'll be right back. Alright, so now that the AVAX earth shade has started to dry, it's pretty much dry. As you can see, it's definitely added some depth and then a little bit of a brown color to the stone, just to kind of give it a soil, muddy look to it. So we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be adding the Mourne Mountain Snow texture paint. I'll show you what I do with this. So this is similar in texture and everything to the Astro Granite. So as you can see, it's still really grainy and everything. I think it's a little bit finer grain maybe, but it works about the same. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of put it in a lot of the smooth places, kind of thick. And this, in my idea, is an idea of maybe it just kind of fell a little bit thicker in those areas. Again, you don't have to be too incredibly neat. And then as I get out of the thick areas, what I do is I kind of almost, in a way, dry brush it on. So this will kind of create a different type of kind of look to it, kind of like it's kind of melting or freshly fallen in there. So I just kind of go through. I don't worry about if I get it up onto the rocks a little bit, that's fine. And then I'll probably go through and do a little bit like that onto the rocks. Just to kind of, I'm not really looking for the texture there, but I'm getting the white onto the tops of the rocks and everything there. So you just go through the whole rest of the base doing this kind of technique. It's definitely not really a science to it. It's just kind of, feeling out where it might be good to have some thicker parts. But where it starts to get really raised, again, that's where I say, like, I just kind of touch the tops of it and kind of just pull it through. I kind of cover it and play around with it, go back and forth. I'll go a little bit like this a few times, just to at least get it on there and kind of see what happens. I guess this is the kind of a part of painting the base that, for me at least, it's really hard to plan out what it's going to end up. I mean, you can kind of go with it, but you really got to feel, as you're painting it, kind of what it's going to turn out to be. So as you can see in the middle here, where there's a lot more raises and stuff, I've kind of just pulled through the white and more or less just used the texture paint more for its color than the actual texture of it. And so that way it's going to highlight the tops of the texture paint that I've already used. So that way you're kind of getting a dual purpose out of it. I'm getting a snow effect as well as a texture paint kind of thing. So back here is a little flatter, so I'm going to really kind of cake it in there. So, alright, well, I'm going to finish up this and we'll come right back. Alright, so I'm just finishing up here with the base. I'm going to add just kind of another quick little brief brushing over it, just really quickly here. But yeah, so this is pretty much where I'm sitting at now. Now the next step is, I want to try to get it before it dries. I'm going to go to this snow here. I'm going to start sprinkling it all over here. I'm going to cover the whole base. Lightly kind of pat it down and make sure that it does get in there and adhere to the different wet spots and stuff. There you have it. No, there's a little more to that, so I was gonna sit here and do a little bit, shake it around a little bit. Alright, so I'm not sure the camera you can see a whole lot of difference, but you can tell those textures. What it does is it gives everything a nice softer look, give it that nice look of snow and everything. So I'm gonna let this dry just a little bit more. Then I will, of course, I'll clean up the edges of the base here, and then I'm gonna add the tundra tufts, which will be another great addition to it here. Okay, so it's dried fairly well. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of the tundra tufts in here. Again, this is not an exact anything. It's just place them here and there. Just give it a little more kind of personality, and just kind of feeling out where they might look good. Kind of add to the base a little bit. So I'll just add a few here and there, kind of feel them out, see where they might look kind of good. Sometimes then it's good to grab the model that you're going to base on and kind of place it and see where it might look good to have a few pieces here and there. Go through the rest of the model and do this and see what we have as a result. Alright, so here I've added the tufts to it. You can see it adds a bit to it. I usually keep them kind of around the rocks and kind of some of the edges of it a little bit to kind of seem like it's coming out from underneath it a little bit. And sometimes I'll put the smaller ones kind of off to the side next to some rocks, but yeah, it adds a little bit to it. And then the next step would be just to add the miniature to the base and see how it looks from there. Alright, so there it is, the final product of the base with my work in progress Bjorn model on it. Yeah, I think it turned out really well. But yeah, as you can see, looks pretty nice. Adds almost a lot of kind of character to it, and I've got it magnetized so I can really put it in some pretty cool poses and stuff and everything like that. But yeah, so that's the quick tutorial on how I do my winter bases. Hopefully it was helpful. And if you have any other ideas that you want to incorporate into them, I say give them a try, because at the end of the day it's to each their own, and there might be something in here that you like, and there might be something here you didn't really like and you want to change it a little bit, and go for it. So anyway, until next time.